Hello. Here I am. I'm late, but I'm here. Hold on. I'm going to turn on a light. Okay, I'm here. Hello. How's everybody today? Give you all a second, see if anybody logs on here. Woo, busy day here. Busy day. I think it was busy. Oh, is it busy? Well, we're short staffed. That's what I want to say. It's roll call dinner on Block Island. I hope everybody has made their roll call dinner plans. And this year it is drive-in only, drive-through and pick up. And I don't know when that is. I should have known before I announced it. Is it 4 to 6, 5 to 7? I don't know. I'm not quite sure when you can pick up. But for us at the library, that means that we have no Judy. She's always a roll call person. She's in the pie room right now, cutting up pies. And so we are short-staffed, and we had our outside hours today, and we were open. And so I'm a few minutes late and a little out of breath, but I'm here. And how are you all? Everybody good? How's your weather? It's kind of a nice day here. We're really having a nice day. And Morgan, who I work with, just told me that she read, and she thought she read it on the bulletin, that there is a nice warm front coming in a few weeks. We're going to have a nice stretch of weather. So let's see what happens next. For today, it's decent. It's like cloudy and then sunny and not rainy and not too windy, and so it's nice. It's fall. It's fall. It's a fall day on Block Island. All right, I'm going to read some Fran Migliaccio today. These are the ghosts of Block Island, and this is more ghosts of Block Island from Fran. And I'm going to read something today. Boy, these are getting old. She wrote these in 2005. That's 15 years ago. Let's see. I want to read the one. Yes, of this one. I want to read this one because this is my neighbor. This is the Nature Conservancy property. And so when my son was first born, couple of years old, maybe older than a couple of years. Maybe he's like 4 and 5 and 3, 4, 5. Maybe he's 5 and 6. Maybe he's 7. I don't really remember. But I rent rooms in my house to people that live on Block Island and work in summer because I think housing is such a crisis, and I do what I can there. And so I often don't have room for family or company. And so I used to put my mom in the Nature Conservancy house. When I came to Block Island, I knew it as Gay Voskamp's house, in the Voskamp house in the back. And they would rent rooms when they didn't have a scientist there or interns there or any field people, anybody coming here to study anything with them. They would often rent a room. And they would do that for me and for my mom. And it was fun because James could go to the backyard and go visit his grandmother. And that's a great house back there with that. It has that big lawn and it sits right at the farm. And it was really, really fun for us. But I always knew that house was haunted. And my mom is one of those who would say, she doesn't want to know, or she doesn't want to hear about it, or she doesn't want to be scared, or she's not scared. And it's not that she's a non-believer. It's just that, it's that ignorance is bliss kind of thing. Like, just better not to know or not to talk about it, right? Or not to acknowledge it. So we never did, but she was in that haunted room, and I'm going to read you a story about it right now. And Mom, if you're out there listening, this is the house. This is the room that you stayed in, I think. I'm not sure. It could have been the back room across the hall. But this is Fran Migliaccio, Ghosts of Block Island, with photography by Maria Mott. The title of this story is Of Moving Furniture and Overhead Steps. Former High Street resident Gay Voskamp is a believer in ghosts. Perhaps, for that reason, ghosts have sought her out. Cynics might suggest, of course, that those who believe in ghosts see and hear supernatural phenomena because they want to believe in them, or that, for the same reason, believers interpret everyday occurrences as supernatural ones. Nevertheless, the ghosts described here, if that is what they are, have made themselves known to others as well as to Gay. When Gay told me this story, she was living in the High Street house that had belonged to her mother. Late one night, about 11, Gay told me, I was in my house with my 2 sons, my brother, and my sister-in-law. This was about 1976. My son, John, and I were downstairs, and everyone else was upstairs asleep. All of a sudden, John and I heard the most awful racket. It sounded as if someone was dragging heavy furniture, and lots of it, across the floor of my bedroom, which was directly above us. The noise went on for a while, then stopped. We went upstairs to see what was going on, but everyone was sound asleep, and there was nobody in my bedroom. It couldn't have been a tree, because there aren't any outside my bedroom window, and anyway, it didn't sound like that. It was something being dragged across the floor. John and I mentioned it at breakfast the next morning and asked if anyone else had heard the noise, but no one else had been up, and no one had heard anything. Another time, a friend of ours, Henry Brown, stayed with us in the house. He was in the house alone for a while. When the rest of us returned, I mentioned to him, offhandedly, that my son and I had heard noises upstairs before, when we were sure that nobody was up there. Like furniture being moved? He asked. I heard that while you were gone. Sounded like a lot of stuff scraping across the floor of your bedroom. I went up and checked, but the room was empty. Gay also told me about 6 years before my conversation with her took place in 1984, Raleigh had been taking care of her cat while she was away on vacation. He went to her house twice a day to let the cat in and out and make sure she had food and water. One morning, about 9, Raleigh was in Gay's kitchen feeding the cat when the telephone rang. He answered it. It was Gay, calling for him and thinking she might be able to catch him while he was there. As they were talking, Raleigh heard some noises upstairs. Gay, he said, it sounds as though there's someone upstairs in your bedroom moving furniture around. Hang on, I'll go check it out. Sounds as if somebody's up there. Steve and I locked the bedroom door before we left, Gay told him, and there was no one in it when we did. Nevertheless, Raleigh went upstairs to have a look. As he reached the top of the stairs, the noise stopped. The door to the room was indeed locked, just as Gay had left it. With no key in sight, Raleigh banged on the bedroom door and called and listened for a while, but there was just the silence of an empty room. No one here, he reported to Gay over the phone, but I know I just heard those noises. Well, you aren't the only one, replied Gay. Gay told me this story in 1990, and as far as she knew, her furniture arranging ghost still lurked on the second floor from time to time. Gay's son, Peter, now managing editor of the Block Island Times, supplied a further detail about his mother's former home. A series of informal Ouija board sessions reportedly revealed that the house, built in the mid-late 19th century, had once been a rooming house, and, according to information gleaned from the Ouija board, a fellow named Clarence Top fell asleep in bed with a lit cigarette and didn't survive. None of this lore was confirmed, however. In the spring of 2004, I checked in with Scott Cummings, the Block Island Landscapes Director for the Nature Conservancy. Gay Voskamp's former house is now the Nature Conservancy's Block Island office. Scott is a lanky man in his 30s who, despite his easy drawl and relaxed manner, is in constant motion. He was surprised to find him at his desk when I called his office. I was surprised to find him at his desk when I called his office. He is far more likely to be found in field, forest, or pond, instructing Block Island school children on birds, beetles, bees, and sundry other creatures that cross the student's path of study or travel. A field ornithologist and master birdbander, Cummings graduated from Earlham College with a major in biology and minor in education, then spent 4.5 years working at internships in field ornithology under the auspices of Brown University, the Smithsonian Institute Migratory Bird Center, Louisiana State University, and the University of California at Davis. Field studies of some 1,400 species of birds a year took Scott to the Louisiana bayous, Panama, and Guatemala, but his heart and his chosen home base are on Block Island. When the job with the Block Island office of the Nature Conservancy was formed through funding by island resident Josephine Merck, Cummings applied. He began his work here in March 1997. Scott, I'm working on my ghost stories, I told him. Have you ever had any strange experiences at your office on High Street? I was a bit hesitant to ask this busy scientist such a frivolous sounding question. Oh, sure, he responded. I've heard footsteps upstairs above my office early in the morning. I guess that was 4 or 5 years ago. From what I understand, the room upstairs is where the Voskamps used to hear things from time to time. That was where the moving furniture was, I told him. Yeah, that's right, he replied. But what I heard was heavy steps, like a man's footsteps, very loud and very distinct. It was pretty bizarre, and I knew for a fact that there was no one else in the house. Scott continued. I've also come in a couple of mornings early, and all the windows on the north side and east side of the house have been open. That's happened twice. It was in the middle of winter, and all the windows had all been closed the evening before when we left for the day. Again, pretty bizarre. And I believe that one of the scientists we had staying here also saw something dart out of that room upstairs above my office and go into another room. But that's all I remember him telling me. My dog won't go upstairs in this house, concluded Scott of his chocolate Labrador, Jake. I've heard that they're sensitive to the supernatural. A few months later, in the fall of 2004, Cummings recounted a further anecdote to Peter Voskamp, who passed it along to me. In the early fall of 2004, Cummings and Conservancy colleague Charlotte Herring were surprised to find that the door to the room upstairs, the source of many an odd noise, was shut. Not only was it shut, but it was locked. And what's more, it was bolted from the inside. Cummings had to climb up a ladder and through a window to open the room once more. Clarence must have been feeling restless. I'm going to do one more. I haven't read this one, but it's one of those stories that, have I read this one? I don't think I've read this one. And it's a ghost story of Block Island that I kind of remember hearing and don't know too much about. So let's read this one together. Again, Fran Migliaccio, Ghosts of Block Island from 2005. This story is The Clock Lady and Other West Side Timekeepers. Do I have a West Side listener today? West Siders out there? Kay Hill, you out there? You listening? Here we go. Are you a West Sider? I think you are. All right, here we go. When my stories about ghosts began to appear in the island newspaper, several friends told me of a mysterious clock lady who had been appearing and disappearing over on the island's west side for some years. The first of these stories was told to me by Captain Bob Cottle. Bob's face had been familiar to me for years when I lived in the Boston area. He was a successful artist who had a long-running show on Boston's public television channels, teaching children of all ages how to draw along with him. I was a young, married career woman when I first saw his show, but was nevertheless quite taken with his handsome, white-bearded artist who patiently explained the reason for each line that he rendered. I watched his show every so often and drew along with him in a hopeful spirit, undeterred by lack of artistic ability. It never occurred to me that I might meet the mythical seeming Captain Bob, but when I came to Block Island, there he was, spending summers at his house on Corn Neck Road. Raleigh had known him for years. The incident that Bob recounted had taken place about 30 years before in the 1960s, when he, his late wife, Betty, his mother-in-law, and his son were taking a spin around the island. We were taking a leisurely little island tour, the four of us, one evening, he told me. And as we were approaching Coonamis Road from West Side Road, the headlights picked up a person standing, facing us on the other side of the road. It was a lady, and she was dressed in something long and light and floating, like a white nightgown, and her hair was piled up on top of her head. I slowed down, and as we drew near, we could see that she was pointing with her right hand to an alarm clock that she was holding in her left hand. She appeared to be disturbed about something. She struck us as a bit odd, and we thought she might be in some sort of distress. So I stopped the car on the southbound side of the road and got out. I turned and started walking back to where she had been standing. She was gone. There was nobody there at all. I looked all around, by the sides of the road, everywhere, but she had simply vanished. No lady, no white gown, anywhere to be seen. My feeling is that if she was a living person, she certainly pulled a fast, quiet, disappearing act. There were no sounds of anyone in the bushes, no sign that anyone had been there. But she had been there just a moment before. All four of us had seen her and thought her rather strange, and now she was gone. We all felt considerably shaken up by the experience. Non-agenarian Fred Benson, that avowed non-believer in ghosts, had never seen the clock lady himself, but he told me of a woman who had come into his office one summer about 5 or 6 years before in the mid-1980s and had seemed very agitated. "Do you know," the lady demanded, "that on Old Mill Road at dark, a woman shows up carrying a clock?" Fred said that he had not been aware of it, but he added that the story spread, and he began to hear it from other people as well. And 4 days after the agitated lady had come into his office, he heard from another source that in a house near the West Side Road end of Old Mill Road, a clockmaker and repairer had once lived. The woman who came into my office 4 days before had not known anything about that, he told me. "Oh, sure," said the West Side resident and island native Arthur Rose, weighing in with his own take on the clock lady story. The clockmaker was Jim Lindsay. When I was a boy, my father and I used to walk over and visit him in that house. That would be, about 60 years ago. I loved to go in there because he had clocks all over the place, ticking away, and at the hour, they'd all strike together. To me, it was an interesting place. The lady that Bob Caudle saw, continued Arthur, was probably just Ed Burt's wife. The Burts rented that same house for a while, and she was a little strange, but she was alive enough, not a ghost. Another resident of West Side Road, Elliot Sanford, was quite informative too. I had met Elliot on Block Island 4 years earlier, in 1986, the morning after I had met Raleigh. I was flying off island on my way to a writing assignment in South Carolina. In the waiting room at the Block Island Airport, and also flying that morning, was a slight, dapper man with a halo of white hair, an aquiline nose, and a gentle laugh lines around his very piercing, observant eyes. We were seated next to each other in the small single-engine plane, behind two young men who kept leaning forward and peering around with apprehensive looks on their faces as the plane buzzed down the runway, took off, and headed over the water to Westerly. "Nervous chaps," Elliot murmured to me with the merest hint of a smile lurking around his mouth as he nodded toward the two. He quietly folded his slim hands on his lap and settled in for the 15-minute flight. I was fortunate enough to become further acquainted with Elliot once I moved to the island. He and I were both members of the Block Island Writers' Workshop, a group of writers who met for regular discussions, shared their writings, and from time to time published small books of their collected works. Elliot, I learned, had been hired in 1926 at age 24 by Harry Houdini as Houdini's personal secretary. Houdini died shortly thereafter, and it became Elliot's job to oversee the disposition of the famous magician's estate. After 2 decades of other career moves, Elliot married his fiancée, Mary Lou, in 1947. The couple raised 2 daughters, traveled, and in 1967 built their retirement home on Block Island. When I met Elliot, in 1986, he was 84 years old, happily living year-round on the West Side with Mary Lou. He was an accomplished pianist and writer, had a wonderfully dry sense of humor, and took pride in the couple's 10 great grandchildren. About 30 years ago, which is when Bob Caudle saw the clock lady, Elliot told me that day in 1990 when we were discussing that particular apparition, 3 friends of ours, ladies who had all been to nursery school together, owned a house next door to Rustic Rides on West Side Road. These ladies said that the clock lady was a real person, a lady who was a little fey and had a thing about time. Apparently, she made a habit of wandering around at night with a clock. They didn't know who she was, though. And by the way, added Elliot, who was an avowed skeptic when it came to ghosts, if you start hearing old-timers' stories about dancing lights here and there on the island, the explanation is simple. In the old days, people used to go out at night in a horse and buggy, and they'd tie a light to the wagon to act as a sort of headlight and running light. The light would jiggle around with the movement of the wagon, and being fairly high off the ground, would reflect in any windows that caught it from any angle, and it would look like dancing lights. So that's what those stories are all about. Elliot did, however, call back 2 minutes later with a clock story, an experience that he and Mary Lou had had at their home on West Side Road. "We have a grandfather clock in our house. We've had it for years, he told me. And for years, both the striker and the chime have been broken. The bowing didn't work, and neither did the bowing, if you know what I mean. It didn't work because several years ago, the thing started striking like crazy at 2 one morning and wouldn't stop. So, to shut it up, we took the weights out and just let it tick quietly in its corner for 5 years. But this year, on January 19th, the night before Mary Lou's 75th birthday, that clock started chiming again in its regular pattern, just as it had years before. So that's our only experience with clocks, but it was a bit eerie. High Street resident Gay Voskamp had her own twist on the clock lady story. A fellow writer in the workshop, Gay has never discounted the existence of ghosts or other paranormal phenomena. A goddaughter of Lester Dodge, who upon his death bequeathed funds to build the Island Free Library, Gay spent her first 38 summers on the island and fell in love with it. She moved here in the 1970s with her 2 sons, Peter and John, to live year-round in the High Street house that had belonged to her mother. Gay has since moved to Narragansett, just across the water. Her former High Street house is now the island headquarters of the Nature Conservancy. The day we were discussing the clock lady, Gay told me of an island tour that she and her friend, Steve Mitchell, had conducted for friends. One summer day, about 1981, Steve and I were driving some mainland friends around the island. This was their first visit, and we wanted to give them a little tour before we all went to the beach. As we were coming around near Southwest Point, Steve pulled onto Coonamis Road so we could show our friends Westward Ho, the old lifeboat station. Suddenly, Steve pulled over, stopped the car, and got out with the engine running. I saw something in the road, he said, and walked toward the back of the car. I tried to think of some interesting tidbit that I could tell our friends about Coonamis Road, and I remembered Bob Cotto telling me about the clock lady that he'd seen about 20 years earlier. So I told them Bob's story and added that lots of people on the island had reacted to it with, "Oh, you saw the clock lady too? Lots of people see her." My friends seemed entertained but skeptical. Just then, Steve came back to the car with the thing he'd seen in the road. He said disgustedly, "I thought maybe it was something interesting, but it was just this old clock." And he put it in the car. We were all quiet. Dead silent would have been a better way to put it. It seemed a weird coincidence that I thought of telling them that story just as Steve had seen a clock, of all things, lying in the road. We took the clock home. Steve thought maybe he could fix it, even though the crystal was shattered and the clock appeared to be pretty well banged up. It was hopelessly broken, though, and not running. The alarm hand had been set at 5:30, and the time on the clock face was 12:15, the exact time Steve had found it lying on the road. We gave up on fixing it and set it on the mantle. We never went to the beach that day because a storm came up. It turned out to be a hailstorm, the only one I've ever experienced on Block Island, and it really raged. And in the middle of that storm, as we were all sitting around the kitchen table, that alarm clock bell went off at exactly 5:30. It spooked all of us. The next day, Steve and I put the clock in the car and drove back to Coonamis Road. We left it there, behind a stone wall, well hidden. It seemed a scary and unpredictable little thing to us. And as far as we know, it's still there. That was a good one. That gave me a little creep up my back. A little creep up my back on that one. When he found the clock in the road. How are you, Dad? Glad you made it for some ghost stories. The first one I read was about the Nature Conservancy house, Dad, where Mom used to stay when she'd come to visit. I don't know if you ever stayed there. You might have. You might have stayed in another room. There, I know I think I put Rob in there once. I think it was your birthday party for you. You might have stayed there. My dad just told me Maddie voted. Well, that's good. Excellent. All right. I'm logging off. I'm going to go do some more work. I'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, right? Today's Tuesday, October 27th. I'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, 3 o'clock with another short story. All right. See if I can find some more creep for us. I'm on the creep. I'm on the hunt for some creep. All right. Take care, everybody. Be well. Eat right. Mask up. Wash your hands. Go vote. Oh, eat vegetables. Sleep. Be kind to each other. All those things. Do all those things. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot. All right. Peace.